In this video, I'd like to talk about stress container. What is a stress container? How does it work? But before we go into that, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Ghazala at the Heart and Soul Cafe. If you've been here before, thank you so much for coming back. And if you're here for the first time, then you're very, very welcome. I'd like to talk about my stress container. We all have one, by the way. What do I mean by that? Well, everything that goes on around you has some kind of effect on you. It could be how your children are behaving, it's what's going on at work, it's you've got some problem in the house, there's been some bad weather and it's caused some tiles off the roof to come off, or it could be anything, you're having problems with the car perhaps. It could be, it's basically everything. Anything and everything that goes on around you has some kind of effect on you, physically or mentally or both. And that's going to affect your stress container. Not everything causes stress necessarily where you can feel that it's stressful. Some things affect you, but you don't actually, it's not going to keep you up at night. It's not going to affect your appetite. It's not going to make you angry or emotional, or you're crying. It's not necessarily going to have that effect. But at the crux of everything, anything and everything that goes on around you has an effect on you. Fact. Now, when I talk about a stress container, I'd like you to imagine a container, right, that has fluid in it, perhaps. Now, every time something goes on around you and it has an effect on you mentally, physically, and it causes stress, some of that stress container gets filled in. It gets filled up. So what's left? You've got less capacity for stress going in. Every time something stressful happens and you haven't dealt with your stress levels and more things happen, the stress container gets filled up a little bit more, and the rest of the space that you have has been reduced, hasn't it? Okay. Now, when we experience things in our childhood, perhaps, and sometimes these can be referred to as ASIST, so adverse childhood experiences, it might be, there's several things that it might be abuse, it might be it might be mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. It could be that your parents have divorced or separated. That might have had an effect on you as a child. It could be that one of your parents possibly was addicted to alcohol or drugs. That might have had an effect on you. You might have had a parent who was in prison, perhaps, and that might have affected you. So it could be all sorts of things that might have happened in your childhood that you've carried, and that is actually going to have an effect and reduce the capacity in your stress container. So it could, because you're already going to have things in there. Okay. Another thing is loss, bereavement, loss of a loved one. That's going to probably have an effect on you, and reduce the capacity in your stress container. A lot of you will already know that I lost my son very sadly, very suddenly, 4 years ago. He had a sudden cardiac arrest, and as a result of that loss, it's reduced the capacity in my stress container. That's fact. That's what's happened. Reason is that I'm carrying that grief with me every day of my life, and I will do for the rest of my life. It's never going to go away. But what that means is I'm a little bit more vulnerable when it comes to other things that might happen in my life. It could be, somebody said something to me. Had I not have been grieving my son, I might have dealt with that differently. But because I am grieving my son, and I might be feeling more vulnerable than I would have felt maybe prior to losing my son, it can make that space in the stress container has been reduced as a result of me grieving. So if I come into contact with something negative, or someone says something that's not very nice to me, that can have a detrimental effect on me mentally, and then that can affect me physically as well, because mental and physical health is very, very much intertwined, and we know that. So what do I need to do? I need to deal with my stress with a lot of importance on a daily basis. I have to. Otherwise, I am going to find it very, very difficult to go through this day-to-day life. And I use the word functioning a lot, and you might think, that might be one of my favorite words, but I do use functioning. And that's how I see it. How am I functioning? Am I functioning well? Or am I just getting through each day? And, how does it look? I have to check in with myself in order to put things into place that I might need. And that might be, am I giving myself enough time? Am I giving grief time? Am I giving it the time it needs? Because if I don't, then it's never going to go away. It's not going to say, oh, okay, Ghazala's a little bit busy. Let's just, I'll just keep myself in the corner quietly. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. It doesn't sit somewhere in the corner quietly. It manifests and it shows its ugly head. If you don't deal with it, it comes and gets you. And that's what's difficult. That's what you need to, those of us who are grieving, who are feeling grief, who are in bereavement, we need to make sure we check in with grief, because grief plays a very large amount, can fill a very large amount of that stress container, and it does for me. And I realize that, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm thinking, oh, I actually do quite well, and I'm doing well, and everything's going okay, and everything's ticking over, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And other times I can feel it might just take something little, like someone said something which is a little bit negative, and I think, and I can overthink it and think, well, why did they say that? Why did they say that to me? And I take it very personally, whereas I don't really need to, because that person probably doesn't even know who I am and what I'm about, and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So someone could say something and not even think anything of it, and not even think that that was actually a hurtful thing to say. But it's how that person's received it. It's how I might have received it, and it's how I deal with it then. What kind of effect has it had on me? That's up to me, isn't it? That's up to me to deal with. So I think it's quite, for me, it's very much a daily thing that I do look at. What does my stress container look like, and how is it, and how is it doing? Because stress, and which, we're talking about cortisol levels mainly, and adrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine. So there's all sorts of things, sort of hormones we can look at, but it's really a matter of making sure that we release some of that stress in however we can release it, because stress has an on switch. It doesn't really have an off switch. It doesn't just sort of turn off. It's constantly, stress is always coming in, whether it's in large amounts or whether it's in really little drops, if you like. But if we don't release stress in any way, then it can mount up. And if it mounts up, it's going to have a detrimental effect on our mental health, which is then maybe going to have a detrimental effect on our physical health. If you just think about it, if you're feeling a little bit stressed, or life is just so busy, you don't really give yourself that much time, do you? You're just so busy trying to just get the things done that you need to get done. And then you're not really thinking about, maybe, am I getting enough sleep? Am I exercising? Am I eating well? You don't give yourself any of that time, because you're just so stressed with what's going on around you. And that's, just the certain things that you have to get done. And you might not be on that priority list at all. You might be right at the bottom of the list. And usually that's how it is, sadly. But we have to remember that in order to function, in order to get on well and function well, not just get through, we have to look after ourselves. We have to look after that stress container. We have to look at that stress container. And there's some things that are in that stress container that you cannot control, that are just there. And we have to just be accepting of that. As I am accepting of what's in my stress container. The fact that I've lost my son, there's nothing I can do about that. There's no way I can change that. It is, and it's fact. But what I can change and what I can have a control over is what else goes into that stress container. I can, there's some control I can have over that and how I deal with stress when it does come in. So the reason for this video really today was talking about how vulnerable we actually are and how we can receive things from others and not even recognize it and not even realize that what that person said or how they behaved actually affected me. But you might be feeling low and you might be feeling a bit off, but you can't really put your finger on it as to what it is that's making you feel that way. And sometimes it can be lots of little things. It might not be one thing. It might not be one little thing that's made you feel stressed or low. It might be a number of things that's accumulated, that's all come together. And sometimes life has a way of doing that, doesn't it? Where lots of things come at you all at the same time. Yes. But life happens. It's how we deal with it. Life, sometimes I hear people saying, oh, why does this always happen to me? Why is it always me that this happens? Well, it's not really. It's not, it just happens to you. These things happen to everyone. It's how we deal with them. That's what's, what it's about. It's how we deal with it. We can all get bogged down with bills coming in, or money's a little bit short and we're struggling along perhaps. Yeah, it can happen to anyone and everyone at certain times of our life. But it's how we deal with it and how much we allow it to affect us. And, rather than pondering over and worrying and stressing, we can maybe, put our rational, heads on and think about things on a step-by-step. Well, maybe I could do this and maybe I could do that. And, when we're in that place, our rational minds sometimes, go into the distance a little bit, and we can't we're not thinking rationally. We're too emotionally charged, perhaps, to think rationally. But we need to, if we do check in, we can maybe ask ourselves why we're thinking that way, why we're feeling that way. Is there another way we could think and feel? Write things down. That maybe help. That could help. So that's how I deal with my stress container. It can be, more than half full most of the time, and that is because of the grief and bereavement that I'm feeling and experiencing, the symptoms of grief that I'm experiencing. But it's up to me then to keep an eye on what else is going on, in that stress container, and how can I control that, and how can I deal with that. I hope some of this content of this video has been, helpful to you. Please do like and subscribe. We need more, people subscribing to this platform in order to build this community that I really do want to build. If you feel that the content of this video might help somebody else right now, do share it. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, look after your hearts and souls.